They built no hospitals. They trained no doctors. They asked no one for permission to heal. And for more than 300 years, tucked inside the rolling green hills of Lancaster County and the quiet back roads of Holmes County, Ohio, the Amish have been using a $2 remedy to do what billion-dollar pharmaceutical companies claim only their drugs can do: kill joint pain. Completely. Permanently. What you are about to hear is not a miracle claim from a late-night infomercial. It is not a rumor. It is a centuries-old tradition rooted in land, in labor, and in a community that never once needed a prescription pad to stay healthy. And the longer you listen, the more you're going to understand why that $2 bottle sitting in your kitchen cabinet may be the most powerful anti-inflammatory agent your body has ever been offered. Before we continue, comment below where in the world you are watching from, and please click like and subscribe for more content like this. There are roughly 50 million adults in the United States living with diagnosed arthritis right now. That number does not include the tens of millions more who wake up every morning with stiff hips, swollen knuckles, aching knees, and throbbing lower backs that have never been given an official label. The pain is real. The disability is real. The sleepless nights, the canceled plans, the slow drift away from the physical life a person used to live, all of that is real. And what does the modern medical establishment offer in return? A rotating door of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, corticosteroid injections, eventually joint replacement surgery, and a prescription for managed decline. The global arthritis drug market is worth over $100 billion a year. That is not a system built to cure you. That is a system built to keep you coming back. Now, drive 3 hours west of Philadelphia into the heart of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Leave the highway. Take the 2-lane roads through the cornfields. You will start to see them. Black buggies moving at a steady trot. Men in flat-brimmed hats guiding draft horses across turned earth. Women in plain dresses hanging laundry in the morning wind. No tractors. No power lines running to the house. No pharmacy on speed dial. The old order Amish have maintained one of the most physically demanding lifestyles in the modern Western world for over 3 centuries. They farm by hand. They build by hand. They raise barns in a single afternoon. They work from before sunrise until after sunset, through every season, through every decade of their lives. Their joints bear a load that would destroy most people in 10 years. And yet the rates of debilitating joint disease within traditional Amish communities are strikingly, almost impossibly, lower than in the general American population. Researchers from the University of Missouri who studied Amish physical activity levels found that Amish men averaged over 18,000 steps per day, and women averaged over 14,000. Compare that to the American average of under 5,000. These are people doing real, heavy, repetitive physical labor every single day of their working lives. And they are doing it well into their 70s and 80s with joints that function. How is that possible? Part of the answer is lifestyle. Part of it is diet. Part of it is the absence of the processed foods, the refined sugars, the sedentary hours, and the chronic low-grade inflammation that defines modern American living. But there is something else. Something that every Amish grandmother knows. Something passed from mother to daughter, from elder to apprentice, across generations that never wrote it down in a medical journal because they never needed to. They just kept doing what worked. Apple cider vinegar, not the clear, filtered, pasteurized apple cider vinegar sitting on the shelf of a corporate grocery chain. Raw, unfiltered, unpasteurized apple cider vinegar made from whole apples, fermented slowly, left cloudy with what old-timers call the mother, that strange, wispy, living culture of bacteria and enzymes that floats through the liquid like something alive, because it is. In traditional Amish households, apple cider vinegar is not a salad dressing. It is medicine. It is the first thing reached for when joints ache. It is stirred into water each morning as a daily practice. It is rubbed directly into inflamed knees and swollen ankles. It is mixed with honey and consumed before bed. It is added to the bath. It is used on children and elders alike, without hesitation, without a dosage chart, without a side effect warning printed on a folded paper insert. And it costs roughly $2 a bottle. To understand why this works, and why it works so well, you have to understand what is actually happening inside a joint when it breaks down. Your joints are cushioned by cartilage, a smooth rubbery tissue that allows the bones to glide past each other without friction. Surrounding that cartilage is synovial fluid, a thick, slippery liquid that acts as both lubricant and shock absorber. Holding the whole structure together is a network of ligaments, tendons, and a joint capsule made of connective tissue. When the system is working correctly, movement is effortless. When it breaks down, movement becomes agony. The primary driver of joint breakdown in osteoarthritis, in rheumatoid arthritis, in gout, in the general wear and tear inflammation that does not carry a clinical name but ruins millions of lives, is inflammation. Chronic, systemic, low-grade inflammation. The kind that does not announce itself with a fever or a visible wound, but instead quietly degrades tissue over years and decades, dissolving cartilage, thickening synovial fluid, calcifying joints, and producing the constant, grinding pain that so many people have simply accepted as a feature of getting older. It is not a feature of getting older. It is a feature of living in an inflamed body. And what creates that chronic systemic inflammation? The short answer is acidity. A body that is too acidic at the cellular level is a body that is chronically inflamed. Modern diets, heavy and refined carbohydrates, processed sugar, industrial seed oils, and animal products raised in factory conditions drive the body toward an acidic internal environment. That acidity disrupts the delicate pH balance that joints require to function, triggers inflammatory cytokines, degrades the enzymes responsible for cartilage repair, and creates the precise biological conditions in which joint disease thrives. This is where apple cider vinegar enters the story in a way that seems paradoxical until you understand the chemistry. Apple cider vinegar is acidic. Its pH sits around 3. You would think that introducing an acidic substance into an already acidic body would make things worse. But the human body does not work that way. Raw apple cider vinegar, when metabolized, produces an alkalizing effect on the body's internal environment. The acetic acid in the vinegar, along with the malic acid from the apples, undergoes metabolic conversion that ultimately increases the body's alkaline reserve, shifts blood and tissue pH toward a healthier range, and directly counteracts the acidic environment that feeds inflammation. This is not alternative medicine speculation. This is basic biochemistry. Beyond the alkalizing effect, raw apple cider vinegar contains a specific compound called acetic acid that has been shown in multiple peer-reviewed studies to inhibit the activity of inflammatory enzymes. It contains malic acid, which supports the Krebs cycle, the cellular energy production pathway, and has demonstrated direct pain-relieving properties in conditions like fibromyalgia. It contains a wide spectrum of polyphenols and antioxidants from the fermented apple material that neutralize the free radicals responsible for oxidative stress in joint tissue. It contains naturally occurring potassium, calcium, and magnesium in bioavailable forms that directly support tendon integrity and muscle function around the joint. And when it is truly raw and unfiltered, it contains the mother, a living culture of beneficial bacteria, enzymes, and proteins that support the gut microbiome, which researchers now understand plays a critical and direct role in regulating systemic inflammation throughout the body. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry found that acetic acid significantly suppressed the accumulation of body fat and liver lipids in test subjects, reducing inflammatory markers across the board. A 2018 study in the journal Nutrients found that the polyphenols in apple cider vinegar had measurable anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects at the cellular level. A study published in Scientific Reports demonstrated that acetic acid inhibits the NF-κB inflammatory pathway, one of the primary molecular mechanisms through which chronic joint inflammation is sustained. The Amish did not know any of this. They did not need to. They knew that when their knees hurt, the vinegar helped. When their hands swelled after a hard winter's work, the vinegar brought the swelling down. When the older members of the community could no longer straighten their fingers in the morning, a consistent practice with the vinegar gave them their mornings back. Generations of direct observation, passed down through lived experience, had arrived at the same conclusion that modern biochemistry is only now catching up to confirm. And they arrived there 100 years before any of us were told we needed a doctor's permission to heal ourselves. Here is what the traditional Amish practice actually looks like. This is the remedy, stripped of every complication, priced at what it actually costs, which is almost nothing. 2 tablespoons of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar. You want the kind with the mother. You will see it floating in the bottle, a cloudy, slightly stringy culture that some people instinctively shake out. Do not shake it out. That is the most medicinally active part. Add those 2 tablespoons to 8 ounces of water. Some Amish traditions add a tablespoon of raw honey, which carries its own anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties and also makes the drink considerably easier to get down. Stir. Drink it first thing in the morning before any food, and again in the evening before bed. That is the core practice. 2 doses per day, 2 tablespoons each. Morning and night for topical application, which Amish healers use for acute joint flare-ups and localized swelling. You soak a clean cloth in undiluted apple cider vinegar, apply it directly to the affected joint, and cover it loosely with a dry cloth to hold the compress in place. Leave it for 20 to 30 minutes. Some traditions warm the vinegar slightly before applying it, which increases circulation to the joint and enhances absorption through the skin. The acetic acid and the anti-inflammatory compounds absorb transdermally, working directly at the site of inflammation, rather than having to pass through the digestive system first. There is also a practice of adding 2 cups of raw apple cider vinegar to a warm bath and soaking for at least 20 minutes. This is particularly effective for people with widespread joint pain, for those dealing with the full body inflammation of rheumatoid arthritis or fibromyalgia, and for anyone whose pain involves multiple sites simultaneously. The entire surface of the skin becomes a delivery mechanism for the vinegar's compounds, and the warm water simultaneously relaxes the muscles surrounding inflamed joints, reducing the secondary pain caused by muscle guarding. Consistency is what the Amish emphasize above everything else. This is not a remedy you take for 3 days and expect a miracle. It is a daily practice, the same way the Amish understand all of their health practices, not as isolated interventions, but as continuous maintenance, the ongoing tending of the body the same way you tend a field or a herd. The benefits of apple cider vinegar accumulate over time. Most people who commit to the twice-daily practice report meaningful reduction in morning stiffness within 2 to 3 weeks. Significant pain reduction typically comes within 6 to 8 weeks. People who have maintained the practice for 6 months or more frequently describe changes in joint function that they had assumed were simply beyond recovery. Now here's the part of the story that deserves to be told plainly. Doctors have known about apple cider vinegar for a very long time. The use of vinegar as a therapeutic agent dates back more than 2,000 years. Hippocrates used apple cider vinegar mixed with honey as one of his primary treatments, calling the mixture oxymel and prescribing it for coughs, infections, and pain. This was not folk medicine operating outside accepted practice. This was the father of Western medicine. In the early 20th century, Vermont physician Dr. D.C. Jarvis spent decades observing the health practices of rural farming communities and compiled his findings into a book published in 1958 called Folk Medicine, which became a bestseller. Jarvis was a conventionally trained medical doctor, not a fringe figure. He was a careful observer who trusted what he saw. By the 1960s and 1970s, as the American pharmaceutical industry entered its period of explosive growth, the economics of medicine changed in ways that gradually pushed low-cost, non-patentable remedies out of the clinical conversation. A $2 bottle of apple cider vinegar cannot be patented. It cannot generate the profit margin that justifies a $50 million clinical trial. It cannot produce the quarterly earnings reports that Wall Street demands from pharmaceutical companies. So, it was not studied, not promoted, not recommended, and gradually crowded out of the cultural memory of medicine by the flood of drugs that could be monetized. This is not a conspiracy. It is an economics problem. And the result is 50 million Americans with joint pain who have never once been told by their doctor that 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar twice a day might change their lives. The Amish never had this problem because the Amish never participated in the economics of modern medicine. They built their health practices on what worked, what was available, what was cheap, and what could be made at home. And in doing so, they preserved a body of practical medical knowledge that the rest of us quietly discarded in the name of progress. Making your own apple cider vinegar at home is one of the most direct expressions of the self-reliant homesteading tradition, and it is also one of the most straightforward fermentation projects a person can undertake. You do not need special equipment. You do not need to order cultures online. You do not need to be an experienced fermenter. The process that produces apple cider vinegar is one that nature itself drives, given the right conditions. Start with whole apples, or with apple scraps, cores, and peels saved from cooking. The quality of the apples matters. Organically grown apples, or apples from your own trees, will produce a richer, more complex vinegar with a more complete nutritional profile than apples grown with pesticides, which can disrupt the fermentation process. If you are using whole apples, chop them roughly. If using scraps, collect enough to fill about half of whatever jar you are using. Place the apple pieces in a clean glass jar. Cover them with filtered or unchlorinated water. Chlorine in tap water will inhibit the fermentation. Add 1 tablespoon of raw honey or 1 tablespoon of raw sugar per cup of water to feed the initial fermentation. Cover the jar with a breathable cloth secured with a rubber band, not an airtight lid. The process needs oxygen at this stage. Set the jar somewhere warm, ideally between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and leave it for 3 to 4 weeks. During this time, wild yeasts naturally present on the apple skins, and in the air will begin converting the sugars into alcohol, producing a rough apple wine or hard cider. You will see bubbles. You will smell the fermentation beginning. This is normal, and it is good. After 3 to 4 weeks, strain out the apple solids. What remains is a rough cider. Pour it back into a clean jar, cover it again with a breathable cloth, and leave it for another 4 to 8 weeks. During the second fermentation phase, naturally occurring acetic acid bacteria will convert the alcohol into acetic acid. The liquid will become increasingly sour. Eventually, you will see the mother forming, that cloudy, slightly gelatinous culture that signals a true, living vinegar. When the vinegar tastes right to you, sharp and complex and alive, it is ready. You can use it immediately. Store it in a sealed jar at room temperature almost indefinitely, and use the mother from this batch to start your next batch, carrying the culture forward the same way bakers carry sourdough starters across generations. An Amish farm in Lancaster County might have a crock of vinegar fermenting in the cellar at all times, the way other households keep a pantry stocked. It is not a special project. It is a basic feature of a self-sufficient household, as natural and unremarkable as keeping chickens or putting up preserves. This rootedness in food production is inseparable from the Amish approach to health. When you grow your own food and ferment your own remedies, you develop an intimacy with cause and effect that modern life has largely severed. You notice that when the diet changes, the pain changes. You notice that when the vinegar practice lapses, the stiffness returns. The body responds to how it is treated in ways that are direct, consistent, and knowable, without needing a medical degree to read them. There is another dimension to the apple cider vinegar story that deserves attention, and that is the specific condition of gout, which represents one of the most painful and in many ways most telling failures of modern dietary medicine. Gout is a form of inflammatory arthritis caused by the accumulation of uric acid crystals in the joints. When uric acid levels in the blood become too high, the excess crystallizes, particularly in the joints of the feet and toes, where the temperature is slightly lower and crystallization is most likely. The resulting inflammation is severe enough that the weight of a bedsheet over an affected foot becomes unbearable. Gout rates in the United States have more than doubled since the 1970s, tracking almost perfectly with the rise of high fructose corn syrup consumption, increased factory-farmed meat consumption, and the explosion of processed food products. It is a disease of modern dietary excess, and it responds with remarkable directness to dietary change. Apple cider vinegar addresses gout through multiple simultaneous mechanisms. The alkalizing effect on body chemistry helps shift the internal environment away from the acidic conditions that encourage uric acid to crystallize. The malic acid directly assists in dissolving existing crystals by keeping uric acid in its soluble form. The anti-inflammatory compounds reduce the acute inflammatory response at the affected joint. And the regular practice supports kidney function responsible for filtering uric acid from the blood before it reaches problematic concentrations. Traditional Amish healers did not have a biochemical explanation for any of this. They knew that when a man came to them walking sideways because his foot had swollen and turned red, the vinegar compress brought the swelling down and the internal use accelerated recovery. They knew what worked. The mechanism was a secondary concern. Modern gout treatment typically involves prescription drugs that either reduce uric acid production or increase its excretion. Drugs with a meaningful side effect profile, including liver damage and kidney issues. The dietary recommendations that accompany these drugs, when followed completely alongside a twice-daily apple cider vinegar practice, would likely produce better outcomes than the drugs alone. But insurance companies do not reimburse for vinegar, and so the conversation typically goes in only one direction. There is a generation of people on homesteads across America who have rediscovered what the Amish never forgot. In fermentation communities, in the growing movement of people leaving urban centers for small-scale self-sufficient properties, apple cider vinegar has returned as a household fixture. The stories circulating in these communities mirror the Amish experience in their consistency. Morning stiffness reduced, inflammatory markers shifted, joints that had been written off slowly returning to function. Not magic, not overnight, but real, measurable, repeatable change in people who simply committed to the practice. There are things apple cider vinegar will not do. It will not reverse advanced structural damage in a joint where cartilage is already largely gone. It will not cure an autoimmune disease at the level of the immune system's fundamental dysregulation. It will not replace surgical intervention in cases where a joint has mechanically failed. It is a powerful anti-inflammatory and metabolic support tool, and it works best alongside a genuinely healthy lifestyle. Real food, regular movement, adequate sleep, reduced stress, and a reduction in the dietary patterns that created the inflammatory environment in the first place. But for the tens of millions of people living with joint pain that reflects a body inflamed by modern life and inadequately supported by modern medicine, the difference between doing nothing and doing the Amish twice-daily vinegar practice may be the difference between a life constrained by pain and a life that is not. 2 tablespoons, 8 ounces of water, morning and night. $2 a bottle. 300 years of continuous use in a community defined by hard physical labor and practical results. You can continue to wait for a pharmaceutical solution priced at $300 a month that requires 6 weeks to take effect. comes with a 12-item list of potential side effects, and demands regular blood work to monitor liver function. Or you can buy a bottle of raw apple cider vinegar at any grocery store in America and start drinking it this morning. The Amish would not understand why this is a difficult choice. They would not understand either why the people who are supposed to be helping us heal have known about this remedy for 100 years and never thought to mention it. Dr. Jarvis wrote his observations down in 1958. The biochemical mechanisms have been documented in peer-reviewed literature for decades. The Hippocratic tradition that predates modern medicine by 2 millennia made this a cornerstone practice. And 50 million people in America are still waking up every morning reaching for the ibuprofen bottle before they can face the day. The knowledge was never hidden. It was just inconvenient. Inconvenient for an industry that profits from chronic inflammation. Inconvenient for a system structured around managing symptoms rather than resolving causes. Inconvenient for a culture trained to seek pharmaceutical solutions and regard anything made at home as insufficiently serious to be real medicine. The Amish do not live inside that culture, and their joints tell a different story. The next time you walk through Lancaster County, watch the older men working in the fields. Watch the ease with which they bend and lift and turn. Bodies shaped by a lifetime of labor, maintained by practices unchanged for 3 centuries. There is no supplement stack, no biohacking protocol, no expensive intervention. There is just a community that never forgot what the body needs and never stopped providing it. 2 tablespoons in a glass of water, morning and night. The cure was never lost. We just stopped looking in the right places. If what you heard today changed the way you think about what you have access to right now in your own kitchen, share this with someone who needs it. The person in your life who has been living with joint pain for years, who has been through the pharmaceutical carousel and come out the other side with a drawer full of half-empty pill bottles and a body that still hurts. They deserve to know this exists. They deserve to know it costs $2. They deserve to know that people have been using it successfully for 300 years. And if you want to go further into the world of traditional remedies, homestead medicine, and the self-reliant practices that kept people healthy long before the age of the prescription pad, subscribe and stay close.